Breaking right now at noon, Philadelphia police say they've arrested 2 people in connection with a deadly arson that tragically claimed the lives of a mother and 2 young children. The fire happened on June 13th on North Corliss Street in Strawberry Mansion. A 6-year-old and a 4-year-old were killed, as well as their mother, who was 8 months pregnant at the time. Police say the 2 suspects were arrested Wednesday. They've both been charged with multiple counts of murder.
June 13, 2025, 4:50 a.m. A Philadelphia row house erupts in flames. By the time firefighters break through the inferno on North Corliss Street, it's already too late for 32-year-old Ashley Thompson. 8 months pregnant, she's found dead on the 2nd floor. Her 2 children, 6-year-old Assad and 4-year-old Alea, are rushed to the hospital with severe burns covering their small bodies. They never make it home. Only 2 people escape: a grandmother who jumps from a 2nd-story window with a toddler in her arms, both somehow surviving the fall and the flames. As the community gathers to mourn, strange Facebook posts begin appearing. Please hold my family in prayer as we mourn our lost ones. R.I.P. to my niece Ashley, gone but never forgotten. Messages of grief that would soon take on a much darker meaning. Because this wasn't some random tragedy or terrible accident, the fire that claimed 3 lives, including an unborn child, was deliberately set. And the person behind those sympathetic social media posts? They're hiding something that will shock this tight-knit Strawberry Mansion neighborhood to its core. Tonight on Shadows of Crime, we expose the twisted truth behind a family dispute that turned deadly. We reveal how a year-long battle over property ownership escalated to murder, and we uncover the chilling warning signs that everyone missed or ignored until it was too late. What drives someone to commit the ultimate betrayal? What happens when the system fails to protect the most vulnerable? And how could the person responsible look the victim's loved ones in the eye while pretending to share their grief? Stay with us as we unravel one of Philadelphia's most disturbing cases of family violence, a story that proves the most dangerous threats often come from those closest to us. Ashley Thompson wasn't just another statistic. At 32, she was building a life for herself and her kids in one of Philly's toughest neighborhoods. Friends described her as a loving mother, daughter, and friend, whose children were her joy, her purpose, and the light of so many lives around them. A GoFundMe page set up after her death painted the picture of a woman whose world revolved around her family. 6-year-old Assad Thompson was her firstborn, a kindergartner with his whole life ahead of him. 4-year-old Alea Thompson Newell was her only daughter. Together with a 2-year-old child who also lived in the home, they made up Ashley's world. And that world was about to get bigger. Ashley was 8 months pregnant when she died, just weeks away from welcoming her 3rd child. The baby, who would never take its first breath outside the womb, became the 4th victim of a crime that shocked even veteran investigators.
Man, them kids ain't had to die and that pregnant lady ain't had to die in there. It was sad.
It was a tragedy, man. Them kids didn't have to die, and that pregnant lady didn't have to die, said Ronald Parker, a resident of Strawberry Mansion who spoke to reporters after the fire. Ashley shared her home on North Corliss Street with her children and 54-year-old Sherry Jackson, the grandmother who would later make the desperate choice to jump from a 2nd-story window with the 2-year-old in her arms, the only survivors of that night. The house itself was nothing special, a typical Philly row house in a neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business, but it was home, and unknown to many, it was also the center of a family dispute that had been brewing for over a year. It's very depressing. The street has an ominous feel because of everything that happened, said Yesenia Naivis, a neighbor who witnessed the aftermath of the fire. Like many on the block, she knew Ashley and her children by sight, if not by name. That's how tight-knit the community was. Ashley's daily life was likely filled with the normal challenges of raising young children while preparing for a new baby. working to provide stability, making ends meet, creating a safe haven for her family in a neighborhood that, while facing its share of challenges, maintained a strong sense of community. What made Ashley's story different wasn't how she lived, it was how she died, and who allegedly made the decision that she and her children shouldn't live at all.
I felt bad for them kids, and then she was pregnant on top of that, so I'm just glad they caught somebody for it.
What Moore and others didn't know at the time was just how close that someone had been to Ashley and her children. How the person charged with their murders had sat at family gatherings with them, had watched the children grow up, had been, in the most literal sense, family. And how that same person would soon post on Facebook, R.I.P. to my niece Ashley Thompson. I am with you in mind, body, and soul, gone but never forgotten. June the 13th, 2025. A Friday that started like any other in Philadelphia's Strawberry Mansion neighborhood until it wasn't. At 4:50 a.m., when most of the block was still deep in sleep, the first 911 calls came in. A house on the 2500 block of North Coors Street was on fire. Not just burning, engulfed. By the time police arrived, minutes later, flames were already shooting from the first-floor windows. Black smoke billowed into the pre-dawn sky. The heat was so intense that responding officers couldn't get close enough to attempt entry. On arrival, officers found the property fully engulfed in flames, the official police report would later state, words that failed to capture the chaos of the moment, the roar of the fire, the screams from inside, the helplessness of first responders who knew people were trapped but couldn't reach them. Philadelphia Fire Department units arrived shortly after police. Firefighters in full gear pushed through the inferno, battling extreme heat and zero visibility as they searched for survivors. What they found was devastating. On the second floor, in what was likely her bedroom, they discovered the body of 32-year-old Ashley Thompson. 8 months pregnant, she had apparently been overcome by smoke while trying to reach her children. The medical examiner would later determine she died from smoke inhalation, her lungs filled with the toxic products of combustion before she could escape. In another bedroom, firefighters found 6-year-old Assad Thompson and 4-year-old Alea Thompson Newell. Unlike their mother, both children were still alive, but barely. Their small bodies were covered with severe burns. Paramedics rushed them to a nearby hospital, working desperately to save them during the journey. Despite the best efforts of medical staff, both children died within hours of arriving at the hospital. Their injuries were simply too extensive, their systems too overwhelmed by the trauma of the fire. Not everyone in the house suffered the same fate. In a back bedroom, 54-year-old Sherry Jackson woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of fire alarms. With flames already blocking the staircase, the only way down and out, she made a split-second decision that saved 2 lives. Grabbing the 2-year-old child who was also in the room, Jackson wrapped the toddler in a blanket, held them close to her chest, and jumped from the second-story window. Both suffered injuries from the fall. Jackson broke her ankle, and the child sustained a concussion. But they survived. They were the only ones who did. While firefighters worked to extinguish the fire, 5 individuals were discovered inside the residence, the police statement explained. 5 went in, 3 came out in body bags, 2 in ambulances. Fire investigators noted that the home had functional smoke alarms. They had worked as designed, activating when smoke was detected. But the speed and intensity of the fire gave the victims precious little time to react. With that much accelerant, the fire moved too fast, a fire official would later explain. They probably had less than 2 minutes to react. Those 2 minutes weren't enough. As dawn broke over Philadelphia, the fire was finally extinguished, leaving behind a charred shell where a family had lived just hours before. Neighbors gathered on the sidewalk, many still in pajamas, watching in stunned silence as firefighters and police continued their work. What initially appeared to be a tragic accident soon took a darker turn. The Philadelphia fire marshal, working with accelerant-detecting dogs and investigators from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, made a discovery that changed everything. The fire had been deliberately set. Burn patterns on the first floor showed clear signs of an accelerant, likely gasoline, poured at the base of the stairs. The point of origin was no accident. It was calculated to create a wall of flames that would trap anyone on the second floor, cutting off their only escape route. This wasn't a tragedy, it was murder. And as investigators would soon discover, the person who allegedly set the fire knew exactly who was sleeping upstairs, knew that Ashley was pregnant, knew that young children were in the home, and set the fire anyway. The question wasn't just who would do such a thing, but why? What could possibly drive someone to murder a pregnant woman and two young children in one of the most painful ways imaginable? The answer would shock even hardened investigators and tear apart what remained of a family already devastated by loss. As firefighters battled the last of the flames on North Corley Street, Philadelphia police detectives were already at work. This wasn't just a fire scene anymore, it was a potential crime scene. The first 24 hours of any homicide investigation are crucial, and detectives wasted no time. Among those interviewed that very day were two people who would later become the prime suspects, 67-year-old Charles Sumter and 44-year-old Fleet Newell. At this early stage, their connection to the crime wasn't immediately clear. They answered questions, expressed appropriate shock and grief, and were released. A decision investigators would later scrutinize as evidence mounted against them. Meanwhile, in a hospital across town, Sherry Jackson was recovering from injuries sustained when she jumped from the burning house. As the only adult survivor, her testimony would prove invaluable and devastating. She had been arguing with her sister for a year over the house, a police source revealed, and that sister was Fleet Newell. This bombshell transformed the investigation. What had seemed like a possible random arson was now looking like something far more personal and premeditated. Jackson told investigators that the dispute had begun after their mother died. The house on North Corliss Street had belonged to the mother, and both sisters claimed ownership rights. Without a formal will, the situation had devolved into an ongoing family feud. But the most chilling part of Jackson's statement was her recollection of a specific threat.
One of the victims is recovering. Miguel.
Yeah, I just spoke on the phone with Sherry Jackson, and she is recovering here at Temple University Hospital after jumping out of the second story of that home with a 2-year-old child in her arms to escape those flames. And she told me that one of the people arrested is her sister, that sister had threatened her to burn that home up, light that home on fire in the past because of a dispute they had over the property. And she's devastated that that dispute led to her daughter and her 2 grandchildren's death.
The investigation gained momentum but moved methodically. Detectives gathered cell phone records, interviewed neighbors, and collected surveillance footage from nearby businesses. They were building a case, piece by piece. On June 25, 12 days after the fire, they had enough evidence to make their move. Police executed a search warrant at a home on the 2800 block of West Albert Street. Inside, they found evidence that would lead to the arrests of both Sumter and Newell. While authorities haven't disclosed exactly what was discovered during the search, it was compelling enough to support multiple murder charges. Both suspects were taken into custody that day. Newell was arrested at the Albert Street address. Sumter was apprehended separately. As news of the arrests spread, the connection between victim and alleged perpetrator stunned the community. Fleet Newell wasn't just some random arsonist. She was the aunt of the children who died in the fire, the sister of the woman who barely escaped with her life. Sources say one of the suspects is related to one of the young victims, local news reported, and the motive may have been a battle over an inheritance. That inheritance was the house itself, a modest row house that became the center of a dispute so bitter it allegedly led to murder. The investigation revealed that the threats to burn down the house weren't idle words thrown in anger. They were a preview of what was to come. and despite being reported, they weren't taken seriously enough by authorities to intervene before tragedy struck. Jackson said she reported the threat, but nothing happened until it was too late, one news outlet reported. A devastating indictment of a system that failed to protect a vulnerable family. As for Charles Sumter's role in the alleged crime, investigators have been more tight-lipped. His connection to Newell and his exact involvement in the fire remain somewhat mysterious, though both face identical charges. What is clear is that police believe the fire was a coordinated effort between the two suspects, a deliberate act meant to destroy both property and lives. The Philadelphia Police Department announced on June 27 that both Sumter and Newell had been charged with multiple counts of murder and related offenses in connection with the deaths of Ashley Thompson and her 2 children. The charges reflected the severity of their alleged crimes: 3 counts of murder for Ashley and her 2 children, 1 count of murder of an unborn child for Ashley's pregnancy, attempted murder for the survivors, arson, conspiracy, and other related offenses. If convicted, they face life in prison without the possibility of parole. As the case moves toward trial, investigators continue to gather evidence and build what they believe is an airtight case against both suspects. But for the families and community affected by this tragedy, no conviction can bring back what was lost in those flames. And the most haunting question remains: how could a dispute over property lead someone to murder their own family members, including young children and an unborn baby? The answer may lie in a toxic mix of greed, resentment, and a complete disregard for human life that even veteran investigators struggle to comprehend. While investigators were gathering evidence and building their case, Flame Newell was doing something that would later send chills down the spines of everyone who knew her. She was posting on Facebook about the victims. Just one day after the fire, while Ashley Thompson's body lay in the morgue and her children were being prepared for burial, Newell took to social media with a message that now reads like a confession disguised as a prayer. "Good morning, Allah. Please have mercy upon my family as they return back to you. Please make their graves spacious." The same day, she posted again, positioning herself as a grieving relative. "Please hold my family in prayer as we mourn our lost ones. The fire on Corley Street was my home, and the family that passed is my niece and her 2 children. Yes, my sister was pregnant. It was my oldest sister and my grandchild that survived the fire. I am not okay yet. I am strong." She even included her phone number, apparently inviting condolences from friends and family who had no idea she would soon be charged with setting the deadly blaze. The performance continued the next day with another post. "R.I.P. to my niece, Ashley Thompson, great nieces and nephew. I am with you in mind, body, and soul. Gone but never forgotten." She added, "Yes, we are laying to rest my niece and her children. My apologies for the delay in completing my thought." The audacity is staggering. The woman who allegedly poured gasoline at the base of the stairs and lit the match that killed Ashley and her children was publicly mourning them, accepting condolences, and presenting herself as a grieving aunt. When these posts resurfaced after her arrest, the community was stunned. Friends who had offered sympathy felt betrayed and manipulated. Family members who had comforted her were disgusted. "Who does that?" asked one neighbor, who had commented with heart emojis on Newell's original posts. "What kind of monster kills someone and then posts RIP about them?" Psychologists call this behavior duping delight, the pleasure some criminals take in fooling others, hiding in plain sight while pretending to be something they're not. For investigators, these posts became additional evidence of Newell's calculated nature, her ability to compartmentalize her actions and maintain a public facade that revealed nothing of her alleged crimes. The house on North Corley Street stands empty now, a blackened shell surrounded by yellow caution tape. Stuffed animals and candles line the sidewalk out front, a makeshift memorial to lives cut brutally short. For the tight-knit Strawberry Mansion community, the murders of Ashley Thompson and her children tore a hole in the fabric of the neighborhood. Residents who once felt safe among familiar faces now look at each other differently, wondering what secrets might lurk behind friendly smiles.
It's very depressing, and the street has had like a very ominous vibe since everything happened.
It's very depressing. The street has an ominous feel because of everything that happened, said Yesenia Nieves, who lives nearby and witnessed the aftermath of the fire. Like many neighbors, she knew both the victims and the accused killers. Hours after the fire, community members gathered near the house, sharing stories about Ashley and her children. Many brought flowers, teddy bears, and balloons to honor the victims. Some stood in silent prayer, others wept openly. When news of the arrest broke, there was a palpable sense of relief mixed with continued grief. A GoFundMe page established to support funeral expenses described Ashley as a loving mother, daughter, and friend, whose children were her joy, her purpose, and the light of so many lives around them. The campaign quickly exceeded its goal, with donations pouring in from across Philadelphia and beyond. Local churches held prayer services for the victims. Community centers offered counseling for children and adults struggling to process the tragedy. School officials brought in crisis teams to help Assad's kindergarten classmates understand why their friend wouldn't be returning. In a neighborhood that has seen its share of hardship, this crime struck a particularly painful chord, not just because of the young victims, but because the alleged perpetrator was family, someone who should have protected these children, not harmed them. When it's family killing family, one resident noted, it makes you question everything you thought you knew about people. On June 27, 2025, the Philadelphia Police Department made it official. Charles Sumter, 67, and Flate Newell, 44, were charged with multiple counts of murder and related offenses in connection with the deaths of Ashley Thompson and her 2 children. The charges were as extensive as they were severe. 3 counts of first-degree murder for Ashley, Assad, and Alea. 1 count of murder of an unborn child for Ashley's pregnancy. 2 counts of attempted murder for Sherry Jackson and the 2-year-old who survived. Arson, conspiracy, causing catastrophe, aggravated assault, and reckless endangerment. First-degree murder in Pennsylvania requires proof of premeditation, a deliberate, planned killing. By charging both suspects with this highest level of homicide, prosecutors signaled their belief that the fire wasn't set in a moment of rage, but was a calculated act designed specifically to kill. The brutality here demands justice, said a spokesperson for the district attorney's office. We intend to hold both defendants fully accountable for each life they took. If convicted on all charges, Sumter and Newell face multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. While Pennsylvania technically has the death penalty on the books, it hasn't executed anyone since 1999, making capital punishment unlikely even in a case this heinous. Both defendants were denied bail and remain in custody awaiting trial, a process that could take a year or more as attorneys prepare their cases, file motions, and navigate the complexities of a quadruple murder prosecution. For the Strawberry Mansion community, the charges brought a measure of relief, but no real closure. The legal system moves slowly, and justice, when it comes, won't bring back Ashley Thompson or her children. They got charged, but so what, said one neighbor who asked not to be identified. Those babies are still gone, that pregnant lady is still gone, no court case brings them back. Others expressed concern about the lasting impact on the neighborhood's sense of security and trust. How do you feel safe when something like this happens? Asked a mother of 3 who lives on a nearby block. When it's family doing this to family, makes you wonder who you can really trust. As the case moves through the court system, the community continues to grapple with both grief and betrayal. The person who allegedly orchestrated these murders wasn't some unknown criminal or random arsonist. She was family. She sat at their dinner table, held their children, smiled to their faces while allegedly plotting their deaths. That betrayal has left wounds that may never fully heal, regardless of the legal outcome. The Ashley Thompson case highlights critical failures that, if addressed, might prevent similar tragedies. First and foremost, take threats seriously. Sherry Jackson reported that Flett Newell had threatened to burn the house with her in it, but this warning went unheeded. Explicit threats, especially those involving arson or specific methods of harm, should trigger immediate intervention. Property disputes need accessible resolution paths. Legal aid services exist specifically to help low-income families navigate inheritance issues, but many don't know these resources exist. When emotions run high over property, violence can follow if legal channels seem unavailable. Fire safety remains critical in row homes where flames spread rapidly between connected structures. Working smoke alarms saved lives in this case, but additional measures like fire-resistant materials and multiple escape routes could save more. Community vigilance matters. Neighbors who notice escalating disputes should be empowered to report concerns without fear of retaliation. Support for pregnant women and families with young children must include safety planning when threats emerge. No one should feel trapped in a dangerous living situation. Most tragically, this case represents a systemic failure. Reports were filed, threats were documented, yet no meaningful action followed until after 3 lives were lost, a preventable outcome if existing protections had functioned as designed. Have you ever witnessed a family dispute spiral into something dangerous? Drop a comment below about the warning signs you noticed before things got out of control. What red flags do you think people miss when relationships turn toxic? Share your experiences. Your insight might help someone else recognize danger before it's too late. And those Facebook RIP posts from the alleged killer, would you have suspected anything was off? Would you have questioned someone publicly mourning the very people they allegedly murdered? Let us know your thoughts. If you've dealt with property disputes in your own family, what solutions worked? What resources help prevent conflict from escalating? Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. Shadows of Crime brings you the cases that mainstream media glosses over, with all the raw details you won't hear anywhere else.